Top 10 Boss Payback Moments that went too far. Number 10. Crushed Mercedes. How far would you go if your boss refuses to treat you properly or didn't pay you what you were owed? Most people would probably have a choice between leaving or just putting up with it, but this construction worker took things into his own hands. While his boss was taking part in an interview on camera, the driver of the cat wheel loader drove into his white Mercedes and proceeded to completely crush it. After the car's destroyed, the worker simply drove off and continued with his job, one that he was unlikely to hold on to for much longer after. Perhaps the most amazing thing about this story, though, is how one of the headlights of the Mercedes was still working after the event. A clear testament to German design. Number 9. Revenge hack. Richard Neal was a director at a company called SLR, which was responsible for providing security systems for Aviva, a large insurance provider. In 2014, he fell out with his colleagues and felt that his position was at risk, so he decided to take revenge on the company while he still had an opportunity to. On the day before a demonstration was planned for one of their clients, he wiped the data from more than 900 corporate devices, something that led to his company losing out on a lucrative contract. Not content with just this, he also created a false ID in the pay system of the company to reject his former colleagues' expense claims and posted an image of a bleeding heart onto the Twitter account, which is a sign that the company's security had been breached. These 3 acts caused incalculable losses to the company, and unsurprisingly, Neal was prosecuted for what he did. He was jailed for 18 months and probably won't be getting a letter of recommendation from his employers anytime soon. Number 8. Becoming Thor. Have you ever wanted to wield a hammer just like Thor? Well, that's what a disgruntled employee did in 2013 to get revenge on the company he worked for. Wayne Crook had been working for the Bristol Flying Centre in the UK, which maintained and stored jets used for private flights. He was fired from his job for moving one of the planes in the hangar, which was something he wasn't qualified to do, and decided to go on a rampage of revenge. He took a hammer and smashed 42 windows, 35 computer monitors, a car, and every toilet and basin on the premises, something that was clearly designed to incapacitate the company and cost more than $250,000 to fix. During his trial, the judge called this a simply enormous amount of damage, and 40-year-old Crook was sent to prison for 20 months. Number 7. Leaking the secret recipe. The recipe for a restaurant's most popular dish is often a trade secret, only known by a handful of people. But what if one of those people ends up losing their job at that company? In 2015, an irate Twitter user claimed to have been recently fired from Raising Cane's chicken fingers and proceeded to detail the closely guarded ingredients from their secret sauce. She said that it was a simple mixture of mayo, ketchup, Worcestershire sauce, black pepper, and garlic powder, something plenty of people made themselves, and said it tasted very similar to what was sold at the chain. Further tweets supposedly revealed the recipe used for their bread too, but the company hit back saying that only the managers of each venue actually know the recipe and that this was a hoax. The Twitter user admitted later on that she had never worked at the restaurant, but it's quite possible this was all true and that she was forced to back down following legal threats. Before we move on, be sure to subscribe to Top 5s with notifications on. Number 6. Borrowing their vehicle. We've all looked at our boss with a tinge of jealousy when we've seen them driving a car that we'd never be able to afford. But a former worker for the Wiener Linien transport company in Vienna, Austria, had his eyes on a much greater prize. A team driver had completed his route and locked his vehicle when he went for a toilet break. When he returned, to his dismay, the tram was gone with no clear signs of who had taken it. He radioed to the control center, who were able to cut the power to that part of the network and prevent the tram from traveling any further, at which point the thief jumped out and ran away on foot. He was later tracked down and found to have been a former tram driver. When he was fired, he had returned his driver's activation key that's needed to take control of one of the vehicles, so it's still a complete mystery as to where he got one from, and quite how he was able to do this. Number 5. Selling product on eBay. eBay has opened up opportunities for hundreds of thousands of businesses around the world, but it's also an ideal place to get revenge on employers. That is, until you get found out. In 2009, a British nurse felt underappreciated at work and was struggling to afford the care costs for her elderly grandmother. She began to take machines home from the hospital where she worked and started selling them on a popular auction site. In total, she was able to sell about $30,000 worth of equipment, such as ventilators and pumps, and it was only realized when a buyer received a product with the hospital's logo on it that they realized they had purchased stolen items. Her money-making scheme landed her a sentence of 18 months in jail and the promise that she'd never be able to work in healthcare again. Number 4. Hacking the system. Companies rely so heavily on computer systems that if an angry employee who has access decides to turn against them, untold damage can be caused. Juan Rodriguez was a worker at Fairfield Inn and Suites, where he was fired by his boss for leaving his post for around 90 minutes one day. He claims he heard from other workers that the boss was going to claim he had made fraudulent bookings for some of the rooms, which would have affected his severance payments. So he decided to use a password he had to create a huge amount of work for the management. He logged into the Marriott reservation system and started to manually reduce the rates being charged for room rentals, changing them from between $200 and $500 to just $10 to $60. By the time the changes had been noticed, the hotel chain claims they had lost out on $50,000. Unfortunately for Rodriguez, he had done everything from his home computer, which was easily tracked, and he was subsequently arrested. Still, it would have caused a headache for his former boss, which is all he wanted. Number 3. Incriminating photos. Kalia Reed found her perfect job at a care company called the Affinity Trust that looked after adults with learning disabilities. Soon after she started, however, she broke up with her boyfriend and then started getting close to her manager. The two shared flirty messages and a few raunchy pictures, and all seemed to be going well, until the boss announced that he had gotten married, despite wishing that it was her that was his wife. To add insult to injury, Kalia lost her job soon after, supposedly for something completely unrelated to their affair, but she was desperate to get her revenge on the person she believed had taken advantage of her. She therefore posted 2 of the images he had sent her onto the Facebook page of his new wife's company and tagged some former co-workers to the images too. As you would imagine, this caused a breakdown in his marriage and made life very difficult for him. A result that many people would say he deserved, and certainly was Kalia's intent. Posting explicit images of someone online without their permission is, though, illegal, and Kalia was taken to court for sharing revenge porn. Luckily for her, she got off with only a small fine, as the judge ruled her former boss's behavior throughout it all had been terrible, but it could have all ended very differently for her. Number 2. Data erasure. There's often a very small window of time between finding out you're going to lose your job and having the opportunity to get your revenge. So when Marie Lupe Cooley from Jacksonville, Florida saw an advert in the paper from her boss looking to replace her, she took her chance. She went straight into work, an architectural practice, and deleted 7 years worth of drawings and blueprints, documents that were valued at around $2.5 million. She had managed to sabotage the entire business, but it didn't take long for the owner to realize who the only person that could have done this was. She was soon arrested and charged with a felony offense, but that wasn't the worst of it for Cooley. It also transpired that the advert her boss had placed in the paper was actually for a role at his wife's company, and that he had no intention of replacing her. It just goes to show that if you're going to take such drastic action, you better make sure you're certain before you do. Number 1. Undo the work you did. One of the biggest problems employees often face is their bosses failing to pay them on time, or in some instances, ever. But surely they have no right to the work you've done if you aren't compensated for it. This might be something that's easy to argue if you work as a designer or in the service industry, but what would you do if you work in construction? Well, this is the question that some builders faced in 2016, and they came up with an extreme response. Rather than giving their boss more time or taking them to court, they went to the building site where they had been working and proceeded to cut down the wooden supports with a chainsaw. By the time they were finished, the building site had been destroyed. While they certainly won't get paid for their work now, we're pretty sure the manager will think twice in the future about how prompt he'll be with invoices. Subscribe to Top 5s for more and check out some of our other popular videos.